Hello there, and welcome to day 87 of A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. And today, I am finally ticking the last Christopher Nolan film off of my personal watch list with one of his early works, the classic now, The Prestige. I love this. I think it's great. As my fiancé would accuse me of being, I am something of a Nolan fanboy. So even when he fails to truly realise the vision that he set out, I can see the mechanics of what he's trying to tell. So with a film like Interstellar, or even recent with Tenet, both those films are examples of him desperately stretching himself to try and tell a narrative, but consequently people have pointed out the weaknesses in spite of the ambition and the vision behind it. But again, in spite of those things, because I can see what he's trying to say and what he's trying to demonstrate, I admire that visionary style and that auteurism. And I truly think he is the sort of the latest in the line of great auteurs. And of course, you know, we're constantly in a state where a new great visionary will come into place. So, you know, from Hitchcock to Spielberg to Scorsese to Kubrick, you know, there is a constant overlap of great visionary directors who are trying to advance the process. And I'm sure someone like the director who did 1917, for instance, you know, I'm starting to see potential for him to demonstrate vision. But where I'm at the minute, you know, Nolan is the type of filmmaker who is pushing filmmaking techniques and pushing the boundaries of narrative, both in what he's trying to say, but also in the way he tries to demonstrate it. And I admire that. And so when I'm watching The Prestige, it's funny really how minimalist it is to some degree, that it's a fairly normal film for Nolan, in so much as he doesn't have the hallmarks of his later work. And it's funny really, you know, having recently watched the early works of filmmakers like Spielberg or Ken Loach, and seeing them testing things out, but what they later go on to do is much more streamlined. Whereas it's funny, because it's kind of the reverse, whereas The Prestige is a fairly ordinary film for all intents and purposes. There are lots of ways it's not, but in terms of the mechanics of the story, it's fairly ordinary. If you had told me this was directed by someone else, I wouldn't have been surprised. Whereas later Nolan films have so much of his hallmarks that you know when you're watching one, and again that feeds back into the auteurism of it, and the idea that certain filmmakers use the same core ideas and techniques so that you can identify their style. And there are some in The Prestige, specifically, and I suppose this is the first thing to sort of focus on, is the narrative time travel that he does. Again, a funny thing about what I say in earlier videos in relation to the present for me is when I was watching The United States versus Billie Holiday, one of my great frustrations was the narrative time travel, that we were constantly jumping from different points in her life with no real rhyme or reason to it, when I couldn't think at the time of a reason why the story wasn't being told more linearly. And I was very frustrated because I was saying, well, why do we jump from the last point, or not quite the last point of her life, back to an earlier point, back to an even earlier point, then go forwards, then jump forward, and it was constantly jumping forwards and backwards. However, The Prestige does exactly the same thing, where it starts at the end of the story, circles round to goes to an earlier point, then goes to the beginning, and is jumping between what I worked out to be about 3 distinct timelines. And where I said I was frustrated and I couldn't get my head around United States versus Billie Holiday and why that film was doing it. I was saying, oh, the Prestige. I can see this is very much his hallmark, and again, I'm aware of the double standard in that, but I understand why he's doing that because I understand his style, and he likes the Ouroboros in terms of he likes the idea of a story that doesn't the ending of his story links to the beginning, and that in a sense we have two different narrative tracks. We have Hugh Jackman's story and Christian Bale's story, and they are both cyclical. They are both, we see them both going round in a great circle, but then they're also intertwined with each other. So it's like two circles laying on top of each other. And again, that's very much, time is one of the things that Nolan is obsessed with. He's obsessed with, the human mind's relationship to time, how stories and time itself are, if you look at like Interstellar specifically, of course, it's all about story and time. You have things like Memento and Tenet, which of course literally are playing with time within the mechanics of the narrative. But even in his other more conventional stories, he is constantly trying to break down the narrative structure and look at different time, how time factors into these different stories. Like, so for instance, in Batman Begins, he's doing a very similar thing. And I suppose the thing that I really got with this, I mean, this is the roar of this film, the core of it, is the fact that it's about obsession, and frankly, it really fits in with, you could watch The Prestige alongside something like Black Swan, and there was something else I saw recently that made me think of Black Swan, but it's not quite on the tip of my mind. But you can get that sense of, it might have been that period of filmmaking where the ideas of the obsessive creative and the sacrifices and the ways in which people, the lengths to which people will, give themselves to the performance, and ultimately not really understanding why, or if they do understand why, being consumed by the tragedy of it and the self-destructive nature that it will affect all the people around them. And I think that's quite a, I suppose in the artistic terms, it's quite understandable because, of course, there is something to be said about the great tragedy of art and passion and the destructive nature of that. Not that that's, a give-all. Like, there are many great artists who haven't destroyed themselves in trying to create a great work. But, again, that is another thing that, is constantly referred to in film, and the idea of how far someone's willing to go. What I think, where I'm placing The Prestige in Nolan's arc is, I mean, this is his first sort of, actually, I say it's his first, I can't quite remember if it comes before or after Memento, but this is the point in which Nolan is starting to realise what kind of narrative he wants to tell you as an audience and what his visions are going forwards. And using the magician, I suppose, is a funny thing because it's the idea of, the magician is the great illusionist, and as a filmmaker, you're a very different kind of great illusionist. And the idea is that, a filmmaker's ultimate goal should be to make the audience forget themselves and forget their reality to invest in the reality of whatever film they're watching, because if you don't, you would never believe you're on an alien planet, you would never believe you're on, the battlefields of Normandy, you would never believe, you were in the future, the past, whatever. And similar, and so I think what the vision of Nolan's in relation to this, or the parallel, is the idea that he sees all art forms like this. The idea that you create illusion, and it's ultimately everything you do and everything you're going to do is in service of the audience, the viewer, the the people who you need to convince of reality or non-reality. And so to some degree there's something of a mission statement with The Prestige, that The Prestige, like I say, is a fairly normal film for Nolan, and that's saying something considering how not normal it is. But when you see his later films, this is almost like the mission statement of his filmmaking. That everything after this is so grand in scale and ambition, with the Dark Knight trilogy and Inception, and then going really off the reservation with Interstellar and Tenet, that it's almost him saying, this is what I wanted. I want to create these grand illusions, and each one will have more of a scale to it. And the line between wanting to just tell you a story and wanting to make it feel real, and the practicalities of that will start to blur. So of course every film he does, he tries to do something incredibly ambitious and practical, and I think that's part of the way he sees filmmaking, is the idea that there has to be a grounding in reality to it, because otherwise, if you don't believe the reality of it, you won't believe the non-reality of it. It's funny, I suppose, when it comes to portraying illusionists within filmmaking, because on some degree I get quite frustrated. This is why I struggle to watch. I've thought about watching things like Now You See Me, or something more conventional like the Ocean's films. But the problem I have with anything which is sort of heist based, because I suppose a heist narrative is very similar to a magician's narrative, which is it's very much about keeping the audience distracted so they don't notice the double, the twist, the what the other hand is doing. And I feel like the problem I suppose I have with them is the idea that a lot of them rely on the fact that once you've seen it, you know what it is, you know what the twist is, you know what the illusion is, and therefore it kind of loses something for you. As much as I do like the Ocean's films, 12 and 8 not so much, but the early Ocean's films, they are hard to rewatch, because you're really then watching for characters. You're not really watching for the great con, the great trick, because you know the mechanics of it. And of course that's really the world of the Illusionist. That's what the whole what Christian Bale, what Hugh Jackman are both saying, that once you know what the trick is, it's kind of underwhelming. And I think that's really the sort of the heart of this, is the idea that this is about two men who are so obsessed with outdoing each other that they start with very simple, very basic magic. That once you get something like the gun trick or something, once you kind of realise what the trick is, you go, oh well, yeah, obviously. Even though before you realise that, you wouldn't think, you would still think it was pretty amazing. And so then it becomes about escalation, and the idea of, each person trying to outdo the other in that escalating sense of, scale. And and I suppose it reaches that point when you have the two great twists, and I'm not going to spoil them because I genuinely think that they are, I actually unfortunately went into the film knowing what the twists were. It's a kind of film which, I couldn't avoid knowing what the narrative beats were, but what I think I enjoyed about this film is therefore seeing the foreshadowing and seeing the groundwork being laid for what those twists were. But the idea that two men have sacrificed themselves to such a degree that they give their lives, not just their performing lives, but their entire lives, and their practically their souls, to creating the great illusions. And again, like I say, the escalation of it, so that by the time you learn what both their great tricks are, those are, they are ludicrous, both tricks. They are outside the realms of human plausibility. Or they're not outside of the realms of human plausibility, but they are, they aren't something that could be recreated. They are specific to those two men. But then it's not really about that to me at that point. It's about sacrifice, and it's about the destructive nature of that. And again, I suppose that's the thing which I like about it, is the sense that, we care, or at least I cared about Rebecca Hall, I cared about Scarlett Johansson, I care about sort of Michael Caine, I care about the people who are interacting with this world without fully understanding what is happening around them. And there is something quite interesting about the showmanship of it, and the idea that, illusionists have to constantly be thinking. I mean, I've met many magicians and a few magicians and illusionists, and the idea that part of it's almost a business of it, and that, of course, if you know what a trick is, they can't sell a trick. But then there's also something about the artistry of it, and that they actually do care about. I used to get quite frustrated with the magician who the show, what was it, Revealing the Magician's Secrets, because I was like, well, why would you reveal the secret? Because then it makes it less interesting. And the mechanics of how it's done are interesting, but the magic is gone because we know how it works. But what that does then is it escalates it, because no magic trick should live forever. That each magic trick should, surpass what has been done, or do something alternative to what has been done before. And so the guy who revealed the magician's secrets almost did a thing where he wiped away all the things that had been previously done, so that now new thinking had to be brought in with how magic and illusions are done. And so there is, like I say, the business of it, the artistry of it, the performance of it, and the idea of the showmen, and the fact that, this is more than just someone doing a trick. This is people, making it a grand performance. And like I say, therefore it relates to something like the Black Swan. It relates to the great sacrifice of great artists and performers and actors, and and we've seen this many a time. And the world around them, the fact is that they have to act in a certain way and present themselves in a certain way, and it really costs them, because you talk to any stand-up comedian, you talk to anyone who's performed on stage, there is something to that where you can't just step off stage and go, okay, I'm normal now, or you can, but there is a certain relationship that you have to develop with the audience, otherwise the illusion collapses quickly. And I think, like I said, that Nolan wants this to be a mission statement in that respect. That he wants us to look at, this was almost projecting to his later films. When you look at Memento and you think about the mechanics of that, or you look at but you look at Tenet and the mechanics of that, and the idea is he almost doesn't want to reveal. Because he could have been a twist director. He could have been a director where he goes, oh, here's the twist, isn't this extraordinary, and gone Shyamalan with it. But I think Nolan almost wants to be someone who lays the groundwork but doesn't want you to know what the twist is. Or he wants you to have the pieces, but without knowing you have to put the end together yourself. So, with people have endlessly discussed Inception and what the ending means and what it represents. And I over the years since it came out, I've heard different interpretations that actually have actually made me rethink the narrative several times over. Memento, of course, similarly, it doesn't have a clear ending. And although people have worked out what that ending is, it's not obvious. It's not like someone turns around and says, this is what the answer is. And even with Tenant, I think we've only just had that. But similarly, people have started to unpack it and said, well, maybe we can interpret it like this. Maybe this character is this thing. And I think if Nolan got to tell the stories like he would want going forwards, I think that would be his way. That he would want to create the illusion, he would want to lay it out for you, and then you to go away and speculate on what you think the illusion was and what the meaning behind it is. I mean, frankly, if Nolan did Prestige now, I think he would be tempted not to reveal at least one or both of the answers to how the two great tricks are done, and to leave enough groundwork that the audience might suspect what they think it is, but not know. But that's not the nature of how this went. But yeah, it really does make me think and look back and reflect on his career. It makes me really want to go back and watch Memento, because as much as I saw Memento, it was a long time ago, one of his early ones that I saw, and I want to reevaluate that. But again, I rather enjoyed it. I think it really does make me, like I say, it makes me think. And I remember growing up watching the show Hustle, and the thing I liked about Hustle was not the idea that the hustlers were able to trick the marks, because ultimately this is all a narrative. When the episode ends, all of them disappear into the mists of fiction. But it's the idea that we as an audience get tricked, and the idea that we as an audience have to reevaluate what that is. And I think that's the thing I like. And if I can sort of sit back and think about rewatching something and recontextualizing it, and if I could do it multiple times over, that's even better. So as I say, if I know what the trick is and it's a very simple trick, a very simple twist, that kind of spoils it. But when it's something where I have to reevaluate my understanding, I think that's something I can chew on for a long time, and I rather enjoy it. But yeah, good film. I'm glad I saw it. So anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like the video, please click like. Please subscribe to the channel if you want to look at further videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I put links to the new videos every day. Thanks for joining me. Take care.